Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer of DATAVERSITY. We want to thank you for joining the DATAVERSITY webinar today, From Theory to Impact, Making Governance Work in the Real World. It is the latest in the monthly webinar series, DGIQ Dialogs, happening the third Thursday of every month. And if you are unaware, DGIQ is named for one of our flagship conferences, which stands for Data and Information Quality, which is coming up the first week in May. Hope to see you all there and in person. Give a shout out if you're going. And for this webinar series, each month we will have either a panel discussion or have a one-on-one interview like today with a data practitioner to hear how they are getting things done. And just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. If you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just a note, Zoom defaults the chat to send to just the panelists, but you may absolutely change that to network with everyone. For questions, we'll be collecting them via the Q&A section. And to find the chat and the Q&A panels, you can click those icons in the bottom middle of your screen to activate those features, or in the top toolbar of your screen. And as always, we will send a follow-up email within 2 business days containing links to the slides. And actually, there'll be no slides for today, and the recording of the session and additional information requested throughout the webinar. And most of you are familiar with Peter Aiken, speaker of our Data Ed webinar series, which is the second Tuesday of every month, who kindly has stepped in to moderate our discussion today. But in case you don't know him, Peter is an acknowledged data management authority, an associate professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, president of DAMA International, and associate director of the MIT International Society of Chief Data Officers. For more than 35 years, Peter has learned from working with hundreds of data management practices in 30 countries, including some of the world's most important. Among his 13 books are many firsts, starting before Google, before data was big, and before data science. Peter has founded several organizations that have helped more than 200 organizations leverage data-specific savings that have been measured at more than 1.5 billion US dollars. All right. And joining Peter today to share her story is Linda Powell. Linda has over 30 years of experience in the finance industry, including commercial banking, banking supervision, and economic research. She spent most of her career with the Federal Reserve System, covering regulatory reporting, bank examination, and economic research, in addition to data management. She was the Chief Data Officer at the Treasury Department's Office of Financial Research and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And in 2018, she joined Citibank as the global head of data governance and data reporting. And in 2021, she joined BNY as the deputy chief data officer. Her experience is extensive, and we are so grateful for her to be here. So Peter and Linda, thank you so much. Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing
we're
this
talking about AI today, right, Linda? Yeah, that was the title of the next upcoming webinar on here. Again, Linda, thanks so much for taking the time today to do this. You've been very generous with your time over the years, and I say that because we've known each other for a number of years. But I think the thing that really makes you expertly qualified to sit right there in that seat is the fact that you've had to do this from sort of very organizations starting out small and growing large, and at the same time coming in on trying to wrestle a beast that's already in motion to move in a different direction and things like that. And again, let the cat out of the bag here, but you're one of the 5 leaders that we've interviewed for our upcoming book on modern data leadership. And so, again, I can't think of anybody who'd be better there. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what details I've left out and the sort of perspective that you're bringing to this?
Sure. As always, happy to chat with you, Peter, and thanks for having me on today. I come with lots of more years than I really like to admit of experience in both the financial industry and the banking industry, including the public sector and the private sector. And there are fewer differences between them than your average person thinks. I've done everything from the building of the technical infrastructure through governance, through data science. I love the business side of data management, but the technical side is a necessary portion of it because you have to have some place to put and store and move your data, and also ways to analyze it. So happy to have a conversation about how do we make data governance more impactful and effective?
This is a hard subject to introduce to people, isn't it?
It is. It is. People, I'm still trying to explain it to my mom.
I think that simple solutions are a good place to start. I've used for years and years managing data with governance, but as I've used that term, I realize that is not quite sufficient because what really we need to work on is data decisions. And unfortunately, a lot of executives make decisions that they don't understand are about data, but in fact really are and have impacts. Do you want to illustrate any that may have crossed your path or heard about at band camp or something like that?
Sure. So let's talk about the ensuring that people understand the information they have available to them to make decisions. So when I start an assignment or a project or a new job, the first thing I like to do is figure out what are the challenges that people are having. And my favorite example is there was one job where I started and there were 5 or 6 different lines of business. And I met with each of the lines of business and just said, tell me your problems. What problems are you encountering? And I kind of heard the same thing from each of them. And I kind of heard what I was expecting to hear. And the top 4 that everybody said bubbled up to the top of where I was going to face my challenge, start tackling the challenges. And it was things like, I don't know what data I have. It takes me 2 weeks to be able to figure out if I have the data I need to do my next project. I can't talk to the other people in the other parts of the organizations because I don't know what their client list is and how that relates to my client list. Or we're using the wrong terms. What is a loan? Sounds like a simple answer, but depending on who you ask, it can have very different meanings. So the first step in getting people to make data-based decisions is ensuring you have the data to support those decisions. So if I go back to my regulatory roots, some of the data-based decisions you should be making is who are you going to do regulatory exams for this year? You need your master data. You need to know who are all the institutions you should be doing exams of. And you need a lot of information about the exams that have been done in the past. But you also need to know through other sets of data, like who might be having some financial problems, who might be having a lot of customer complaints, who might be having different things. And so by listening to my end users about the problems they were having, I was able to figure out, okay, here's the data that you need to be able to solve that problem. And then let's figure out how do we actually implement that and move that forward. So whoever your community is, whether they're trying to regulate banks or they're trying to service their customers or provide healthcare to clients, you need to understand what information do you need to make the decision. And then it's the data governance role to make sure you have that information and it's of a high quality in a way that you can use it.
So I heard you say in particular that everybody was complaining about the same things across all of the various silos that you looked
Yep.
at. That would seem to lend itself then to some sort of application of theory, would it not? Talking as the
I love,
academic side of things.
yeah. I love to start with the theory. In theory, and I'm going to guess that most of the people on this call know that in theory, when you need to set up a data management practice, you need to have a logical infrastructure, like what's your master data? How do things relate to each other? You need to have a technical infrastructure because you got to store the data somewhere. You need governance guidelines, you need metadata, you need data quality. People know that, but you can't walk into a company and say, oh, you need master data, you need governance, you need data quality program. They don't know what they're going to get from that. So the problem then becomes, how do I take my theory and a lot of the theory that DAMA has laid out for us, and put that into practice. How do I get them to understand it? And so some of the examples I just gave were great examples. So talking about metadata, I've walked into many organizations and talked about the need for metadata, and there was one organization where I talked about, okay, first of all, I got people to buy in that they needed in a list of what was all the data that they owned, but then taking the next step of what did all of that data mean. At first, I was met with, I have John. John knows everything about the data. I don't need a database telling me about my data. I have John. And after several conversations about, John's been here for 2 years. He's just out of college. Your average person changes jobs 2 years after college. Maybe we should take some of the information John has and store it, was met with nope, don't need it. Don't need it until John resigned. And then I took that, I think it's Rahm Emanuel has the saying about never waste a good crisis.
What a crisis.
Suddenly we had a crisis. We didn't have John anymore. He was walking out the door in 2 weeks, and we had 2 years worth of information in his head. So I was exactly. So we said, all right, well, this is the exact time to reintroduce the idea of the metadata repository. So I got buy-in from all the senior people because John was leaving. And we didn't say, oh, well, we'll do that next year. And we didn't say, oh, well, let's put out a 6-month plan on how do we get there. We said, oh, let's get everything we can in the next 2 weeks. We'll go out with a prototype, and then we'll iterate from there. And I'll say I've had similar success with creating master data sets, because you can walk into an institution and all of the silos have their own master data set. And it's really about finding the timing when merging master data sets is going to be impactful. With something like a master data set, it's when somebody does a big technology implementation. So I was successful in one place where we needed to create a uniform master database, and nobody wanted it. Everyone was like, I have my own little list of all of our clients, and I can keep it myself, and I don't need it. And then when they were doing a big technology implementation, where having a central list that they could read rather than having to maintain it was suddenly beneficial. And so fortunately, we had done all the prep work for it. We were ready to go. We were waiting for the time when we could launch it, and we launched it. And I remember having somebody on my team who was struggling a little bit with too many competing priorities at the time. And he was telling me, he was like, oh, can't we do this in 3 months? And I said, no. It's not often that I'm in, it's not often that I'm the something's urgent person. But in this case, we had until that new system was implemented to get the master data up and off the ground. Otherwise, that chance was going to be gone for years and years. So we just had to push it through, make sure we had it. And then we got master data for almost the entire organization, just because the timing was right to be able to get that in there.
I'm going to guess also that at least a couple of those metadata repositories that you started are still in action, still in use today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I will say whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, I will take claim to the microdata reference manual that the Federal Reserve uses, which the MDRM actually existed long before I started working with it, but it was a bunch of paper binders. So we took it, we digitized it, we figured out how to manage the metadata within it, and we published it for the world to be able to see. So there's at least one.
So we've got our first question, Linda, which is that Dave,
sure.
and hi, Dave, wants to know how you funded the projects around that. Now, part of it you said was crisis driven. Let me make sure I read his question correctly here. So let's see, Linda, how did you budget for getting said metadata repository bought and populated? Yeah. And so you had the
Ah,
crisis. That certainly is helpful.
yeah, crisis always helps everything, except for whatever the crisis is about. I tend to start really small. So the first metadata repository that I started from scratch, I started with a MySQL database and a summer intern. So it was super cheap, almost free. And we just took, frankly, a lot of marketing information from vendor data and dumped it into one place. And then we had all the information in one place. So people didn't have to go and look here and look there and look, call John and call Jay and whoever else. Once people had that, they were thrilled. On day one, everybody was so excited. Oh my God, here's all the information in one place. And on day two, all I got was complaints. It's not good enough. It doesn't take me to the data. I need to know these other 5 things about every data set. Oh, I don't have variable level data. And that's where the funding came in, because people could
Yeah.
see the value of the metadata, which cost almost nothing to put the original content together, but actually getting it to the next level that was going to bring your operations to more efficiency, was where I got the funding. People were like, oh, I want more, so now I'll pay. And usually people paid a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Back
Right.
then, rather
This
than buying a Calibra or an
right.
Informatica or a really large
Investment.
investment in tool, we started small. And I would do the same thing today. Now, most of the big organizations will already have a Calibra or an Informatica or what have you. And I think what I'm more focused on now would be, how do you populate those repositories in a painless way? If you've ever had to manage metadata, it's painful, it's manual, but there are ways to scrape the data from your applications and populate your metadata repositories. And that brings your metadata much more in line with your actual data. One of the biggest problems with a metadata repository is they're always out of sync. So yeah, I guess that's my long-winded answer on funding.
Well, you did hit a really good point there that I think we want to circle back around, and maybe this would have occurred later, but it's sort of a natural spot for it. Synchronization, change management, culture, these dimensions, not typically part of the thought process around implementing what are perceived as IT technology projects on this. And I know that you've got some thoughts around how that needs to be a critical part of it in order to make sure these things happen. Where do people go to start learning about and getting expert in this? So assume somebody on the webinar here has I'm going to do this. Oh, I hadn't thought about change management. What's your guidance in that focus? Because this has been, I think, key to some of your successes.
Oh, that's a great question. So I actually went to a seminar on change management many, many, many years ago. And the takeaways for me from change management were, one, you got to tell people why you're making the change, otherwise no one will adopt it. Two, you have to make it simple enough. So, and it has to improve their lives in some way, otherwise no one will adopt it. And three, you have to repeat steps 1 and 2 5 million times. You can't implement a change and then expect it to take hold. It's very
It's
challenging.
constant reinforcement.
It's
Constant reinforcement.
constant reinforcement. There was a second half to your question, which I've forgotten now, Peter.
The other part that he was asking was how did we get the funding in terms of that and then for populating it, which I think you started to address by saying it's
Yeah,
continuous.
yeah.
And this is something that, go ahead.
Yeah, so an argument I've had with several of my, every time I've worked with a metadata repository, there's two camps. One camp says the end users should populate and maintain their metadata. And, my camp says your metadata has to be centrally managed and automated as much as possible and controlled centrally. So let me explain why I say that. One is doing it centrally. You can automate more of it. And you can do the reconciliations and the controls to make sure that it's good. Two, you have someone who's an expert across all of the metadata, so you get consistency in your metadata. The people who actually really know the information to put into the metadata repository are absolutely the owners of the data or the end users of the data. The problem is that's not their primary job. They don't care if there's a metadata repository filled because they already have the information. And I go back to, my story about, John knew everything until John left. John's primary job was not to make sure that the metadata repository was complete and accurate. His main job was to source data for people and do analysis. And by doing that, he learned everything about the data. So your average end user is not going to be rewarded for maintaining metadata. And therefore, they're going to focus their time on what's going to help them achieve their business objectives. Now, I have found that you can play to the human vanity. And if I go and I put together metadata about Peter's data set and it's wrong, Peter will correct me. No doubt about it. He'll either call me and tell me what I need to fix or change, or he'll ask for access so that he can update it. Either way, I'd gladly give him access to update it, and I'd gladly make whatever changes he wants. But if I start with something, the end users will comment and give me feedback on it and tell me how to make it better or more accurate. But to ask them to write something on a blank slate, I haven't found that to be particularly productive.
We're getting some good questions here, and I know we wanted to continue our discussion with the theory.
Sure.
So let's push forward on that a little bit, and we'll circle back to the questions. We actually have an anonymous question, Linda. I'm not sure where that comes from, but that'll be cool. So, and you were talking though. Again, we started off with the theory, and that's great. But in order to get it to work, and that was, I think, where you were picking up.
Yeah, so I like to start with the theory, and I walk into a shop, and in my head, I'll be looking at things from a theory point of view. Do they have their master data? How are they with metadata? How are they with data quality programs? But I don't talk to the business in those terms. And I like to start, I've been sort of doing some research on the side, and I've put together a framework of where I like to think about how do I put everything that's in the DIM box. The DIM box has that wheel, which has 16 different pieces to the wheel. And how do I put that into a simpler framework that businesses can understand? And so from the 16 pieces of the wheel and from the many years of trying to implement this, there are really four main pieces that I like to ensure and I think resonate with the business that needs to be accomplished. One is architecture, and you could break that into two different pieces. I put it all in one, but you need to have your logical architecture and you need to have your physical architecture. My observation is when I'm working with the businesses, they don't always know the difference between them. So I just lump it into architecture and then we parse it out behind the scenes. You need to have data quality, and that is one of the 16 that's on the DIMBOK wheel. And then you need to have governance, which is your policies and your rules and your controls and your measurements. And then lastly, it's not explicit on the DIMBOK wheel, but it's usage. And I think with AI, usage is becoming even more critical. The current DIMBOK talks about BI, but it's going to have to talk about AI, I'm sure, in the next version. And so by talking with the businesses about architecture, and most people, their head goes straight to the technology, and talking to them about data quality, they get that. They understand usage better than anything else. And then talking about governance, which is sometimes a little bit, if you talk about policies and rules and controls, they'll get it. So the way I like to go from theory to implementation is through the lens of that framework. And I almost always start with usage. What do you want to be able to do? Because that will dictate how I do the architecture. That will dictate how I do my data quality. And all of that will dictate the governance framework that I want to set up.
Somebody's asking a clarifying question. So just to keep moving, it says by architecture, do you mean operating model or meta model or something else?
I'm talking about everything that falls under the category of architecture. So the logical architecture would be your meta model and your data modeling. But you also need a physical, technical infrastructure. Where are you going to store the data? And within that, I like to put the interoperability. Every time you move data, you run the risk of corrupting or protruding it. And you want to make sure that you have the controls in place or a simplified enough architecture that you're not creating problems through your architecture.
And yet, I'll take the devil's advocate position with you here that I know you've been on
Sure.
that seat many, many times. But so you're telling me that in order to do data governance, I need to draw a bunch of pictures. What's that going to get me? And that's a really harsh one, right?
Yeah, really. Shame on you, Peter. So what's that going to get you? It's going to get you a design. It's going to ultimately get you where you want to be. And if I'm going to build you a house, I'm not going to start by pouring the concrete floor if I don't know how many bedrooms you want in the house. I've got to start by understanding the design and the picture.
Pam has posted in the chat for everybody. You can go take a look at it. Roger's diffusion of innovation theory, which is absolutely useful. There's just 5 criteria that she's saying you need to implement them. And again, I don't disagree with the theory that's in there. We're trying to bring it even a little closer in here. But if you aren't familiar with it, it's certainly worth a quick read on that. So when we talk about moving in that direction, right? And you're looking at the end user things, one of the challenges we've always encountered is that end users aren't taught to say requirements, right? They don't understand what you mean when you say that. And so one of the things is that little picture becomes 1,000 words. When you show them a data map and they go, oh my goodness, yes, and they can point to this particular spot and do other things. It just really makes a significant improvement over just trying to talk around it. And the other direction I go, and see if you've had a chance to use this as well, is that almost every CEO out there would love to have their organization speaking the same language, using a common vocabulary. And it's a really common problem, and most of them resonate with that. So again, it sounds like you've at least encountered that as well.
Oh, absolutely. again, I'll go back to loan. What's a loan? Is an overdraft on your savings or checking account considered a loan? Well, some people would, but most people wouldn't consider that a loan. So being able to get down to the atomic level of understanding the information is important at all different levels. You're getting bigger and smaller, Peter.
It's amusing, right? So I had it before where it kept cutting off the top of my head. Now I turned AI on, and now it's doing all sorts of. Hey, that's the world we live in today, right, Linda?
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions here. So since you noted it as well, Anonymous says, in your view, how does AI help speed up the implementation of data governance into practice at companies which I guess are traditionally slow to adopt the manufacturing?
Yeah,
So it,
so I have a couple of thoughts on AI that may or may not be conventional. One, I think AI just makes everything faster. It makes the implementation of I like it. Personally, it's made a bunch of
use it
my
daily.
things. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
use it all the time. It makes life a little easier. I'm not sure about the impact it will have on the neurosciences and whether people will start forgetting things because we're not using our brains as much because we're going to AI. But that's a different conversation. I think it makes everything faster and it makes people want things faster. And it also makes results come out a lot faster. And so my fear with the results coming out much faster is people get more information and get faster results. And they may stop questioning them as much because they're getting it so quickly. And so one of my favorite refrains is that I think in the age of AI, we need to increase our skepticism. It used to be if I put together a report and somebody knew I was writing code because I'm a terrible coder, they would always question my results. Like, are you sure these numbers are right, Linda? And I would go back and double check, and sometimes my code was not great. But doing questions on the fly, I think we used to get a lot more skepticism. And I think now that because there's a model or an AI agent doing it, people are assuming that it's right. And we can't do that. We need to still put a skeptical eye to something. If you get a number that just feels off, we need to be skeptical. I've told this story a couple times, but I used to have a team of statisticians, and before I went back and got my master's in quantitative finance, I didn't always understand the statistics. And so there was one time we had done an analysis and they were put it on the board and explained it to me. And I was like, I don't think so. I just don't buy it. And the senior statistician got very angry with me and, explained to me that it's just math, Linda. You can't just discard it because it's math and you don't agree with it. And I was like, I don't agree. And I think it's wrong. And it turned out it was wrong. I didn't know why at the time. It wasn't until I finished my master's that, I learned more about statistical modeling and all the assumptions that go into it. And if you didn't use exactly the right model, why it wouldn't be right. Like, I didn't understand why I thought it was wrong, but I was skeptical and it didn't make sense to me. So I think we need to keep that skepticism now, because there's a lot of modeling going on behind the scenes. It's a bit of a black box, and we don't know what's going on in that black box. So we should ask hard questions. And I think there's been a number of public cases where AI will say something, and if you ask it some hard questions, it'll admit, oh, I didn't have that information, so I made it up. Like, oh, okay, well.
Certainly
There we
appreciate the
go.
help, right?
Yeah, I think I went on a little bit of a tangent there. Not sure I
No, not
the
at all,
question.
though. let's think about it. I don't know if you've seen how the young people use these things, right? I'm trying to get my phone to come up in
Oh, yeah.
whatever range it is. Well, I've got an invisible phone. There we go. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, just people trying to get past the advertising to get to
Hmm.
a video or song or answer their
Hmm.
email and things. And it's just, the word is in shitification. Excuse me, everybody, for using the word, but it's in the dictionary now. So thank you, Corey, for that. Things just keep getting, more crowded with things that they are not, features that we didn't ask
Hmm.
for on all the rest of
Yeah.
this. And I know this is straying a little bit far from governance, but maybe not. Is governance going to be something that's going to include, how apps use governance and things like that? Because your comment that you made earlier about being skeptical, I actually use the word defensive, and I think that
Ah,
that's
okay.
the mindset that generation is currently using. I mean, again, I'll go to my students, but you called me. Why did you call me? Well, you didn't show up for an appointment. I thought you might want to chat.
Yeah.
Text me. Don't call me.
Yeah.
It's like, and it is, there is a lot of data coming at them, and it is their duty as people in society to be, pushing back on this, because there are people that are, I mean, the reason we're losing our privacy is because people are selling our stuff. We didn't ask for it, and the only reason they're selling it is so they can advertise. Seems like a
Yeah.
really bad cycle there. There's nothing virtuous about it.
Well,
Anyway, how does that pull us back in? Yeah.
we're giving up our privacy. I know that my whereabouts is tracked by my phone, and I have chosen the convenience of the phone over that level of privacy. Now I try to minimize it. I used to have work with a chief data officer who would always tell me which apps to use and which apps not to use, um, because of their privacy policies and settings. But yeah, no, we are actively giving up our privacy rights because for convenience. Every time I walk or drive by a Starbucks, something pops up on my phone saying, "Oh, did you need a cappuccino, Linda?" Like it knows I'm close to a Starbucks and I like cappuccinos. So
I can show
I
you how to
think
turn that one
governance,
off.
what was that?
I can show you how to turn that one off.
Oh, okay. I think I figured it out, but it just it's creepy.
Yeah,
Even if I don't get the notification, I know it knows. It's
that's
creepy.
right.
Um, so I think governance plays a huge role in AI. And I think companies really need to pay attention to the creepy factor. There's a very famous case about Target and where the store knew that a young girl was pregnant before her parents knew, because of the types of lotion she was buying. Um, and it's
And Target will
creepy.
now deny that that even happened today. That's the most
Oh,
amazing thing.
oh,
It never
really?
happened as far
Oh,
as they were concerned. Yeah, nope, just
no.
fake news. Go away.
I have the article.
I know, New York Times. I remember it very well. I was like, wow, who let him out of the bag? He wasn't supposed to tell that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but
Oh, sorry.
I
Let's
think,
let's let's just do that real quick though, because this it does fall. So the way the article got written was because the New York Times reporter was at one of the data conferences that we go to and geek out at,
yeah,
and somebody from Target was going, "Look at these cool things that we can do." Right? Nobody had told him that that may not be the best thing to go off and do. So the New York Times wrote an article and appeared in the New York Times, and everybody went, "Oh, we're stopping. We're not shopping at Target anymore. This is too creepy."
yeah. It there's so much of our personal data is used in very creepy ways. And we're all putting a lot of really personal information into Chat GPT. There's bots out there that are being used for, and I don't mean just Chat GPT, but all of the AI. Um, I don't know how that data is being stored. I don't know how it's being used. I don't know. Um, I'm careful about what I put into an AI request because it is stored forever, potentially. And I didn't read my privacy statement
Oh, well,
particularly
you
carefully.
can actually not read those anymore.
Yeah,
One of our colleagues at New York University did a study and found out that 100% of them contained the word other in them, which meant
yeah,
the only way you could truly understand that one was by finding all of the others that were associated with the other. And if 100% of them have the word other in it, then you're never going to get to the end of the thing. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's a legal argument, but it was at least a don't waste your time kind of an argument around that.
Yeah.
Let me bring another piece in here that I think does go in, and this is the manufacturing question brought this to mind. Again, this is just an IoT device, nothing in particularly, super exciting about it. But what happened in that market was that everybody waited for the bottom line, which meant there was no security, there was no encryption, there was no, so that you can go to a website now called opennannycams.com or something creepy like that and look in people's websites because they've just,
Oh,
oh, you've never seen that? Oh, it's awful.
I haven't seen that.
Google it sometime.
I will admit, I don't even remember what do you call the dots that like you can talk to Alexa. I don't have
Oh,
an
yes.
Alexa in my
No, I
house.
don't.
I recall when Alexa first came out, reading about a court case where somebody subpoenaed the Alexa. And not that there's anything going on in my house that's particularly interesting. I don't really want it all recorded.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
we're getting, I guess, about two-thirds through here at this point. And you mentioned getting a smaller and easier, more digestible piece. And
Hmm.
it's definitely easier for people to understand 4 things than it is 11 things or whatever the numbers are.
Yes.
And I agree with that so much. I have another slide that I use oftentimes where I've got people are saying, oh, this is the difference between data governance and data stewards and data management and data program and data quality, blah, blah, blah. And you know what people hear? Remember that old Charlie Brown thing where they goes, wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
wah, 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 wah. So I just say call it a data program, and
Yeah.
this is part of that data program in order to do that. So given that kind of a need to get there, is it sufficient to simply say, look, we're going to come in, we're going to help you solve some problems that in a way that you haven't solved them before, and in order to do that, we'll end up with a couple things. We'll end up with a group of people who know more about data than they did when they started the process. And therefore, now you can look at something that becomes a self-improvement in that. Well, that was an interesting switch.
Yeah.
See, AI is great for us, right?
Yeah.
It's just saying, don't get distracted, Peter. Um, really, go ahead. I'm throwing you a bunch of things out there. Pick what you want to talk.
Yeah. So I'm going to say again, I go back to what is what is the end user need? What
What
does
do
the
they need?
CEO of the company need? If you're working in the marketing department, what are they trying to market? What do they need to be able to market things well? If you're servicing customers, what do your customers need? And then working backwards from there. I've always gotten my greater success from working backwards. I've spent most of my career working in banks or the banking industry. And if I'm working in a bank, liquidity is king. Liquidity is the most important piece of information in a bank because I did research on this when I was at the Fed during the 90s when there were a lot of banks failing, is like it's 96 or 98% of banks fail because of liquidity issues. Lehman didn't fail because they didn't have enough money. Lehman failed because of liquidity issues. And so making sure you have great liquidity data so that you can understand your liquidity position is always like one of the top things that every bank needs to know. And I don't have to go in and say, oh, you need data stewards, you need this. I can go in and say, you need high quality liquidity data so that you can manage your portfolio, and not just for safety and reducing risk, but because when you have a really good insight into your position, then you know what money you can invest, what money you need to hold. You can make more money with your excess money. If you're overholding on your liquidity, then you've got an opportunity cost there. So it's leading with what do you need to be able to do. And then you go into, oh, okay, in order to do this, we need to know where you're getting your data from. So do we have a good understanding of all of the databases, how the money's flowing. Do we have people who are looking at it to make sure it's of high quality? Do we have, and then you go into what are the pieces you need, but you always got to start with what's the problem. Otherwise, nobody cares.
Yeah,
I'll
I
go
mean,
back
you're
to
just
John.
another.
John, you
Right.
know, John knows everything about all the data. So why do I need a metadata repository? Because
Now that I'm
John
a
got
gray
a
beard
better offer.
myself, I say that, there are going to be those kinds of people, though, in every organization because the work has to get done no
Yeah.
matter what. And the question, in there is from a governance perspective, if we just let it happen, it happens. But if we actually take and harness that and start to build a team, start to build capabilities, people will be in there. I got a little comment on here. Somebody says, all it talks about data, but nobody ever talks about the software systems. You want to say anything about those? How do you interact with them as a CDO or a data leader?
So the software systems are a part of the ecosystem. You have to store your data somewhere, but what kind of software system depends on what you're doing. And I'll give extremes. I used to support economists. Economists want to store every piece of data that's ever created, ever. If they have 100 years worth of data, they're happy, because the more data they have, the better their analysis can be, because it's got longer periods of time and there's a lot of statistical benefit to it. They also want to know every time the data changes. So if you release GDP today and then it gets changed 3 more times over the next 3 months, I want to be able to go back and say, did I make a good decision based on the data I had at the time? Or versus if I made that decision on the data I have today, I might have made a different decision. So economists have very specific needs for data. In banking, I don't really care about a lot of that. I don't need 100 years worth of data. I need, maybe 5 years worth of data is kind of a lot. I have retention policies. I'll follow the retention policies. And I don't necessarily need to know every change as something gets revised. I need to know what it looks like now, and I need it to be accurate. And so how you're going to store those different needs for data is going to drive your decision on what software you're going to use. And so I would say the software is the critical component, but it's a dependent component. I have seen too many times where people are trying to put, and volumes of data is the other factor, but I've seen people try and put too much volume of data into something like a SQL server. And then you have to spread it out over 10 SQL servers. And then you have to figure out how do you tie it all back together. We have big data environments now. I'm dating myself because there was a time before the big data environments where that was just what you had to do. So you need to pick the software that works with the business need that you have for your data. I will say the one thing that I try to avoid is having to do a lot of integration between different software packages. If you can buy one package that already integrates your metadata, your technology change management, your data change management, your data storage, the more you can use one integrated package, the easier your life is. You may not get the optimal for each package, but having to figure out how do you connect all of these different dispersed pieces is, in my opinion, a big waste of time. So
I think we can actually quantify that. We've done some work that shows it's between 20 and 40% of IT budgets, which is not an insignificant amount of change there.
yeah, I have spent so much time trying to piece things together, and I might not get the best possible data quality application, or I might not get the best possible lineage application, or I might not get the best possible
But the integration is worth
metadata,
something, is what
whatever
you're
it
saying.
is. But if I can get it all in one package, I can put more time and effort into automating the different pieces that are
And
already
opportunity
integrated.
costs,
Yeah,
right? So along those lines, I'll add this one other thought, which is that if there is potential for either moving to or acquiring a new software package, we do consider it now best practices to ask the vendor to supply a logical model complementing your logical architecture that you've wanted to have in there so that you can see whether the new software will complement your existing architecture or whether it will do something else. It's also a great screen because if you tell them to send us over a logical data model and they don't know what that is, you probably don't want to do business with them in that sense.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
This leads us to another question here. What is your view of data governance capabilities provided by the large platforms? I think you started to hint to them. So Azure, Snowflake versus using a mix of specialized tools such as catalog, DQ, metadata tools with large platforms together. I had somebody tell me the other day that their data management plan was Preview, is it, that's now in Microsoft Purview?
Oh, I'm not,
Yeah.
I forget what the Microsoft governance suite is called, but
Um,
yeah, I'm gonna say I have some personal opinions about best in class. I don't know if I should share them, but um, yeah, I'm I'm very impressed with Databricks, and if they're actually able to do everything that they say they do, I think there's there's a lot of benefit there. I've used Calibra in the past. They have a nice suite. They're not data storage, but they have a good governance suite. The Informatica's web version I like a lot more than their on-prem version. And after having talked to Informatica a couple times, they didn't just port their on-prem version up to the cloud. They redesigned it, and it's much nicer. I haven't used the Microsoft suite that much, but for
and I think
governance.
Hunter's
But
suggesting it's called Purview. Thank you,
oh,
Hunter, for
okay.
that.
Yeah, but I have talked to some of the folks at Microsoft who worked on that, and I know they're highly competent, and they have great ideas about how it should work. So I suspect it's pretty good. So and Snowflake has a lot of really nice features in terms of the metadata and the security of the data through the metadata. So
And you do get to the
again,
point where,
the hard part is we all start out from someplace before, and then these new products come on board. And so there's always, it's what's the cost of transition? My personal opinion is there's got to be a huge benefit to transitioning. It's either got to be just that much better of a product, or it's going to reduce my integration cost dramatically.
and of course, there's always the plan versus the actual too. I forget one time there was a statistic, I don't know if it's still valid, that if you had a plan to get rid of 100 systems with one, at the end of the exercise, you'd have one system that would have 50 systems in it, and you'd still have 50 systems in some shape or form hanging around the outside. So better, but not where we would like it to be.
Yeah, if you can't turn off your old system, you didn't really convert.
Is that a part of data governance?
I think that's more technology governance, but if it's a data governance tool, then yeah, it should be part of the data governance.
And I also say that if you're able to get access to your company's cloud bill, there's things you can do in that area from a governance perspective, just as a very technical level. Sometimes we've done.
Oh no, you're frozen, Peter.
To
Oh, there you are. You froze for a minute.
But sometimes you end up overpaying the cloud companies because your data could have been better organized, or maybe consolidated or combined or duplicate. Again, the amount of duplication is just astronomical, and it's certainly not in their interest to help you thin that out. So a good place to go look for for dollars if you get a chance on that. So Linda, we're getting
Yeah.
to about 6 minutes. Anything
Yeah.
we haven't covered here as far as that goes, or do you want to sort of make a final statement on here? Our idea is theory is good, and I assume that we learn about theory from these types of webinars. And are there any theory books that you find useful at the moment out there, or reading
Oh,
materials,
there's a
or send them
lot
back to
of books out
TDAN, or
there.
okay.
There's a lot of books out there, but one thing I will mention is in moving from theory to practice, one of the things we talked about before we got on today was how do you measure whether or not your program is being successful? And I will mention there's a book called The Goal. It was written, I don't
Mhm.
know, a million years ago. It was an MBA book. Um, it's Peter's going to find it somewhere.
We didn't rehearse this.
No, no. And I read it probably about 4 years ago or so, and was reminded that so much of our measuring of metrics and KPIs and KRI, oh, there it is. Yep.
Hard to see,
It's
right?
it's a fun, quick read, but it reminds you, measure what's important. Don't just measure throughput. It talks in a it gives an example. The whole story is about manufacturing, but it's the same for any kind of work. Is like I don't want to just measure for data quality, how many of my data quality controls are failing or passing. As a data manager, I want to know that, but that's not valuable information to my CEO. What my CEO wants to know is what's the quality of my data. And a proxy, I think a better proxy for that is if I'm a bank, how many reports do I have to refile? How many times does a regulator come back to me saying, we think your report is wrong, and we end up having to revise it? Or how often are my reports late? How often are my internal reports late? Because then you've got something's not happening on time. Um, so I think it's by measuring the end result impact is infinitely more important than how many data elements did I run a check again? How many passed? Those are all important operational metrics, but those aren't your metrics that you should be giving to the executives. So I think making sure you measure what matters is the
It's
key.
a wonderful book from that perspective. There was actually a 45-minute film made of it
Oh,
that you can
really?
find on the internet out there if you look, things like that. But it also, I think, had a very good focus, and I've used it in my data governance efforts as well to help keep people focused on things because there are two themes to the book. One, you're not sure until you're sure about what problem you're trying to solve, you're flailing. And then
Hmm.
two, once you solve that problem, there's another one that comes along right behind it. So you got
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
working on the next one. And it's actually a wonderful way of keeping a cadence up with a data governance group as far as that goes. Any other books that you might point people to? I certainly believe in the goal and I make all my students read it. I don't know if they actually do or not, but they pass the test.
Oh,
So I
okay.
suppose.
Well, I hope they do. It's just kind of a fun, easy read. Let's see. My other favorite sort of business economics book is called Nudge.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and and it's not, well, I guess I do use it in data management as well, because it talks about how you create opportunities for people to do the right thing. If I hand you a blank sheet of page and tell me, about your metadata, I will probably get a blank sheet back, or I'll get something with 3 words on it. So my implementation of Nudge is I give you a blank sheet. I give you a piece of paper with a bunch of information in it, and you can edit it and revise it, and I'm much more likely to get a response. So I think the book Nudge is the other thing. If I give you something to comment on, you're much more likely to get me better information. Or if I suggest, hey, do you want to automate your metadata? um, collection, and here's how you could do it, I'm much more likely to get a yes than a, oh, what do you want to do? Do you want to do it manually or you want to do it in an automated fashion? Leading people to what are probably the better answers is what Book Nudge is about. And I see
That
Shannon
brings
has
Shannon on.
rejoined us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda.
Yes, thank you both so much for this incredible discussion and for sharing your experience, Linda. Really appreciate it. And Peter, thank you so much for moderating today. And just a reminder to everybody, that is all the time though that we have for this particular webinar. And just a reminder for everybody, I will send a follow-up email by end of day Monday for this webinar with links to the recording. Thank you so much to both of you.
You have a great day,
Happy to
Shannon.
be here.
Linda, great
Thanks
to
for
see you as
having it.
always. Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending and being so engaged in everything we do. Appreciate y'all. Have a great day.
Cheers. Bye.